The year is 1941. Across Southeast Asia, the winds of war sweep unchecked. Japan rises, a hidden hand shaping the destinies of nations. In the forests and rice fields of western Cambodia, an uneasy silence falls. Villages once peaceful are now watched by foreign eyes. Thai troops march under banners of reunited provinces, their boots heavy on sacred soil. The Mekong whispers a warning to all who listen. These lands are no longer their own. Temples that have withstood centuries tremble beneath the weight of new rulers. Monks clutch sacred texts to their chests, hiding them from prying hands. Mothers clutch children as strangers in uniform inspect their homes. Cambodia has been a pawn before, and once more it stands between empires. Japan watches from the shadows, approving the occupation, calculating the price of allegiance. Thailand claims victory, but for the people of Battambang and Siem Reap, there is only fear, loss, and the quiet determination to survive. This is the story of the puppet provinces, of silent resistance, of a land ruled not by its people, but by those who sought to bend it to their will. This is Cambodia under occupation, Part 1, The Puppet Provinces. The dawn of 1941 carried with it a world ablaze. While Europe was engulfed in fire and steel, a different kind of war crept quietly across the lands of Southeast Asia. Japan, emboldened by conquest in China and the ease of European distraction, expanded its shadow across the region. Its gaze fell upon Indochina, not yet fully its own, but ripe for manipulation. It was a time of opportunity, and Thailand, with its eyes on lost provinces, moved decisively. Battambang and Siem Reap had changed hands before, returned to Cambodia under the 1907 Franco-Siamese Treaty. Yet the memory of Siamese control still lingered in the hearts of villagers, a mixture of resentment and resignation. Now, under Japan's approval, Thailand would once again administer these western provinces. The move was cloaked in rhetoric: reunion of the fatherland, liberation of lost provinces, phrases that dripped with nationalistic pride. But to the people living in the villages and temples, these words meant little. They had felt the weight of foreign boots on their soil before, and they knew the price it demanded. The arrival of Thai administrators in late 1941 was swift and calculated. Soldiers marched along dusty roads, their boots kicking up clouds that caught in the eyes of onlookers. Administrative offices were established in towns that had once been quiet centers of trade and worship. Thai officials, many wearing crisp uniforms and carrying the trappings of authority, began the process of bureaucratic occupation, registering households, imposing taxes, and declaring new regulations. The language of governance switched overnight from French and Khmer to Thai. The populace, unprepared and frightened, was left scrambling to understand the new order. Daily life under occupation transformed rapidly. Farmers who had once tended their rice paddies for generations found themselves conscripted for road construction, forced labor on military installations, and the extraction of resources for their occupiers. Each day began before dawn and stretched into dusk, the weight of fatigue matched only by the humiliation of subjugation. Taxes were levied not only in money but in rice, livestock, and labor. Villagers had little choice. Resistance could bring violent reprisal, and compliance offered only survival. Education became a tool of assimilation. Thai administrators enforced new curricula in schools, banning the Khmer language from classrooms and replacing it with Thai history, culture, and loyalty to the monarchy. Children memorized maps that erased the borders they had known, learned songs that praised rulers they had never seen, and recited oaths that demanded allegiance to a kingdom they were born outside of. Monks and teachers who attempted to preserve the Khmer language did so in secret, whispering lessons under the cover of night or in hidden corners of pagodas. The silent rebellion of culture became one of the few avenues of defiance left to the people. Temples, once the centers of village life and spiritual guidance, were not spared. Thai administrators inspected sacred sites, recording treasures, manuscripts, and statues. Some relics were removed for transport, others were desecrated, their symbolic importance minimized in the name of authority. Monks who resisted these intrusions risked punishment, and yet many continued their work, preserving sacred texts and teaching forbidden prayers in secret. The temples became double-edged refuges, places of worship and centers of clandestine cultural preservation. Fear permeated daily existence. Villagers learned quickly that any perceived defiance harboring knowledge, failing to pay taxes, or speaking Khmer in public, could attract punishment. Whispers of disappearances, beatings, and forced labor circulated from town to town. Mothers clutched their children as Thai officials patrolled the streets, and fathers hid their tools and rice stores, praying the occupiers would pass without notice. The Mekong River, which had long been a lifeline for trade and travel, became a route for those attempting to flee the occupation, carrying only what they could salvage. Refugees moved in silence, carrying the fear and uncertainty of a people caught between rulers who claimed to govern in their name, but acted only in their own interests. Despite these hardships, resistance persisted in subtle, quiet forms. Monks and elders passed down stories of Khmer history and heritage in hushed tones. Children learned to recognize the sacred symbols of Angkor and Battambang, even as the official education sought to erase them. Farmers carved traditional motifs into plow handles and doors, acts of quiet defiance against the erasure of culture. Even the act of speaking Khmer in private became a revolutionary gesture, a reclaiming of identity against the imposition of a foreign tongue. Economic hardship compounded the social strain. Thai administrators imposed tariffs and levies on trade, controlling markets and limiting local autonomy. Farmers had to surrender portions of their harvests to supply Thai troops or government offices. Labor quotas drained villages of able-bodied men, leaving women and the elderly to manage households and fields under increasing duress. Markets, once vibrant centers of exchange, became subdued, the bustling energy replaced with tense transactions under the watchful eyes of foreign soldiers. Japan's oversight ensured that Thailand's actions remained within limits that suited the greater strategic aims of the Axis power. While Thai officials claimed autonomy, Japanese officers and advisors monitored administration closely, extracting resources and ensuring that Cambodia remained a pawn in a larger game of imperial dominance. The duality of controlled Thailand, acting on behalf of itself, while under the shadow of Japan, created an environment of uncertainty and fear. No one was entirely secure, and every action was measured against the potential for retribution from one power or the other. Yet, amidst oppression, the human spirit persisted. Families developed routines of survival, hiding manuscripts, passing down oral histories, and creating networks of mutual aid. Villagers whispered warnings of raids and inspections, protecting one another as best they could. Children learned secret games that taught them history and geography of their own land, ensuring that even under foreign rule, the knowledge of Cambodia's past would survive. Monks held secret ceremonies in back rooms or forests, keeping traditions alive while publicly submitting to occupiers to avoid punishment. The occupation also reshaped relationships among locals. Old rivalries and feuds were muted in the face of a common oppressor. Communities, once divided by minor disputes, coalesced in survival. The fabric of society, though stretched thin, adapted in quiet resilience. It was an existence built on small victories, a festival celebrated quietly, a manuscript preserved, a child learning the Khmer alphabet away from prying eyes. Throughout this period, fear was a constant companion, but so was adaptation. Villagers became adept at navigating the precarious political landscape. Thai officials were watched, their weaknesses noted. Japanese officers were observed, their instructions memorized and leveraged for protection. In subtle ways, Cambodians learned to reclaim fragments of autonomy, even under occupation. They recognized the limits of defiance, but within those limits, they exercised agency. As 1941 progressed, the provinces under Thai administration settled into a tense rhythm. The initial shock of occupation gave way to a fragile routine, where life continued amid the shadow of foreign rule. Yet, the people never forgot. Each act of survival carried with it the memory of loss, lost autonomy, desecrated temples, stolen harvests, and the constant presence of armed authority. The scars of this period would linger, shaping the collective memory of Battambang, Siem Reap, and the wider Cambodian nation. The story of the puppet provinces is not a tale of conquest alone. It is a story of endurance, of culture preserved in whispers, of identity maintained in small acts of defiance. While Thailand and Japan maneuvered for power, the true struggle was fought quietly in villages, in temples, and in homes. Cambodian resilience, invisible to the outside world, became the silent backbone of survival under occupation. By the end of 1941, the foundations of occupation were firmly in place. Thai administrators ruled with the approval of Japan. Cultural suppression was systematic. and the population had learned the painful calculus of obedience and survival. Yet, even in the darkest months, the spirit of Cambodia endured. The puppet provinces were not conquered in heart or soul. They had been claimed on maps and by armies, but the people carried the memory of who they were, and in those memories, the seeds of resistance and preservation quietly grew. The years to come would test that resilience even further. Forced labor, famine, clandestine education, and the ever-present shadow of foreign rulers would define life until Japan's defeat finally reshuffled power. But in this first chapter of occupation, Cambodia had learned the bitter truth. To survive under imperial ambition required courage, cunning, and the quiet determination to remain Khmer in the face of overwhelming oppression. And so Battambang and Siem Reap entered a dark chapter, a period where foreign voices dictated law and tradition, yet where the Khmer spirit, though suppressed, refused to vanish. These puppet provinces, though governed by outsiders, kept alive the memory of who they were, memory that would outlast occupation and endure beyond the fall of empires. Part 2. Silent Resistance. The years that followed Thailand's annexation of Battambang and Siem Reap were marked not by open battlefields or declarations of defiance, but by a quieter, more fragile war. The war of memory, of language, of identity. To the outside world, Cambodia's western provinces were mere bargaining chips in the great chess game of empires. But to the farmers, monks, and children living beneath foreign flags, survival itself became an act of resistance. The weight of silence. By 1942, Thai administration had settled into a rhythm. Schools taught Thai history, markets operated under Thai oversight, and temples were carefully monitored. The occupiers congratulated themselves on their order and efficiency, boasting of the reunion of lost provinces. Japanese advisors circulated in the background, ensuring that the occupation fit within Tokyo's broader vision of a greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere. But beneath this surface of control, a heavy silence clung to the land. It was the silence of unspoken words, of rituals performed behind closed doors, of identities shielded from scrutiny, a silence that carried with it both fear and defiance. For many Cambodians, the first act of resistance was language itself. Children were punished in schools for speaking Khmer, forced to learn Thai scripts and recite Thai anthems. Yet in their homes, parents whispered the Khmer alphabet, teaching their children to trace the curves of letters in the dirt by candlelight. In villages where Thai officials rarely ventured, monks gathered small groups of children after dusk, reciting Khmer prayers that had been banned by decree. Every whispered word became a rebellion, every lesson a reminder that they were not what the occupiers claimed they should be. Refugees and the river. The Mekong River and its tributaries became lifelines for those who could not endure the occupation. Families packed their lives into small boats, pushing away under cover of darkness, drifting towards safer zones or French-controlled areas where they hoped to find relief. The riverbanks bore silent witness to this exodus. Boats overloaded with children and elders, farmers clutching bundles of rice seed, monks carrying bundles of manuscripts. Not all made the journey. Patrols intercepted refugees, sending them back or worse. Rumors spread of disappearances, of families who had vanished on the river and were never heard from again. Some were said to have been executed as warnings to others. Yet still, people fled, driven by desperation and the refusal to live under the humiliation of occupation. Those who remained endured in different ways. Refugee camps formed along the Cambodian borderlands, makeshift villages of bamboo huts and red mats where disease and hunger struck as hard as any soldier. Aid was scarce, and Japanese officials turned a blind eye, seeing the misery as a useful tool of control. Thailand, for its part, showed little concern for the displaced. The refugees were evidence of disloyalty, treated as a nuisance rather than a tragedy. Forced labor and exploitation. Resistance also took the form of endurance in the face of exploitation. Thai administrators, under Japanese encouragement, pressed villagers into forced labor. Men were conscripted to build roads and fortifications. Women and children carried supplies and harvested crops for soldiers. Entire villages were sometimes relocated to make way for military infrastructure. The work was brutal. Hours stretched from sunrise to sunset. Food rations were minimal, and beatings were common for those who faltered. Stories circulated of men collapsing in rice fields, their bodies left unburied as warnings. Families learned to hide sons of working age, disguising them as elderly or sick. sending them into forests when labor officers arrived. Yet even under this oppression, acts of resistance emerged. Villagers worked slowly, sabotaging tools, breaking carts, or deliberately misdirecting construction. Crops were hidden before harvest, stored in secret caches deep in the forest. Food meant for soldiers was quietly diverted to feed families. These small acts, imperceptible to the occupiers at times, allowed Cambodians to reclaim fragments of autonomy. Temples as havens. The Buddhist temples of Battambang and Siem Reap became the hidden heart of resistance. Publicly, monks complied with Thai administrators, performing ceremonies in Thai or under strict oversight. But privately, the temples became sanctuaries of Khmer identity. Manuscripts were hidden beneath floorboards or sealed in clay jars buried behind monasteries. Monks continued to teach Khmer script to children, framing lessons as spiritual instruction rather than secular education. Ceremonies for Khmer New Year, banned under Thai rule, were conducted in secrecy. Villagers gathered at night, lighting small lamps shielded by cloth, chanting prayers in low tones to avoid detection. To celebrate one's own traditions became a radical act, a declaration that Khmer culture would not be erased. There were risks. Thai soldiers raided temples, suspected of harboring resistance, confiscating manuscripts and beating monks. Some were arrested and vanished into prisons, their fates unknown. Yet for every monk silenced, another stepped forward, carrying the weight of memory. The temples became not only places of worship, but fortresses of identity in a time of cultural siege. Whispered networks. Beyond temples, clandestine networks of resistance slowly formed. They were not armies in the traditional sense, but loose groups of villagers, monks, and former soldiers who refused to accept Thai authority. Weapons were scarce, but information became their weapon. Scouts warned villagers of impending raids, and messages were carried through coded songs or carved symbols left on trees. Some groups made contact with the Free French and anti-Japanese guerrillas operating in Indochina, though these links remained tenuous. More often, resistance took the form of simple refusal, refusing to adopt Thai names, refusing to teach children only in Thai, refusing to forget. Women played a crucial role. While men risked forced labor or arrest, women became carriers of information, hiding messages in baskets of rice or bundles of cloth. Children too were enlisted, their innocence a shield that allowed them to slip past guards unnoticed. The occupation turned daily life into a battlefield of survival, where every action could carry hidden meaning. Hunger and desperation. By 1943, hunger had become another form of oppression. Forced requisitions of rice and livestock left villages struggling to feed themselves. Famine loomed as crops failed under the strain of overwork and poor planning. Malnutrition spread, weakening entire communities. Desperation drove some into direct confrontation. Stories spread of villagers ambushing supply caravans, seizing rice and livestock for their families. These acts were met with brutal reprisals. Villages burned, suspected leaders executed. Fear rippled through the countryside, yet so did admiration. To strike back, even briefly, was to reclaim dignity. Hunger also deepened reliance on cultural solidarity. Families pooled what little they had. Monks organized secret distributions of rice, and communities relied on age-old traditions of mutual aid. Resistance was not only about defying occupiers, it was about ensuring that one's neighbor survived another day. The shadow of Japan. Though Thailand administered the provinces, Japan's presence loomed everywhere. Officers visited markets and temples, inspecting operations, ensuring that the flow of resources benefited Tokyo's war machine. Their interest in Cambodia was not its people, but its position a pawn on the board of empire. For many Cambodians, this dual oppression created a sense of suffocation. Thailand demanded loyalty while Japan demanded obedience, and both viewed Cambodia not as a nation, but as territory to be used. The silence of occupation was not merely political, it was existential. The Khmer people had been erased from the conversation of empire, reduced to shadows in their own land, endurance in darkness. Yet even in this darkness, endurance persisted. Children learned to sing Khmer lullabies, monks carved hidden inscriptions, farmers buried rice seeds for the future. Refugees returned with stories of survival, carrying hope that the occupation would one day end. Resistance was not measured in victories or battles, but in survival itself. Each day a family endured was an act of defiance. Each word of Khmer spoken, each prayer recited, Each tradition remembered was a blow against erasure. The occupation had sought to turn Battambang and Siem Reap into puppet provinces, extensions of another nation's identity. Instead, it forged a quiet resilience. Beneath the silence, the spirit of Cambodia pulsed, waiting for the moment when the shadows would lift. Part 3. Return to Shadows. The year was 1945. Across the world, the empires that had reshaped borders and dictated destinies were crumbling. The once mighty Japan, which had loomed over Southeast Asia like an unchallenged giant, was reeling under the weight of Allied bombs and defeats. In Europe, Nazi Germany had fallen. The tide of history was shifting, and with it, the fate of Cambodia's occupied provinces would be decided. But for the people of Battambang and Siem Reap, the end of the war did not come like a sudden dawn. It crept slowly, a whisper carried from village to village. Japan was losing. The occupiers who once stood tall in their uniforms now looked uncertain. The Thai officials, who had strutted proudly through markets and schools, now glanced nervously toward the horizon. And the Cambodians, who had endured for long years of humiliation and erasure, began to hope that the shadows of occupation were finally lifting. Japan's collapse. In the early months of 1945, the signs were undeniable. Japan's once unstoppable army staggered in Burma, in the Philippines, across the Pacific Islands. Allied aircraft appeared in Southeast Asian skies, symbols of a power beyond the reach of Tokyo's slogans. Supplies grew scarce. Food meant for soldiers dwindled. Even the Thai administrators felt the bite of hunger, no longer able to take us freely from the villages. The aura of Japanese invincibility cracked, and with it, the facade of Thai control. The puppet provinces no longer seemed secure. Villagers whispered openly of Japan's decline, though always cautiously, for the occupiers remained dangerous even in retreat. Monks included veiled references in sermons, speaking of impermanence, of empires that rise and fall like waves. Their words gave hope to those who listened carefully. Yet the collapse of Japan also brought new dangers. Occupiers desperate to maintain control grew harsher. Forced requisitions of food intensified. Villagers were pressed to provide more labor, more resources, even as they themselves starved. For many, the final year of occupation was the cruelest an empire in its death throes, squeezing every last drop from the people it had subjugated. The crumbling of Thai rule, Thailand too, began to shift. Its alliance with Japan had once brought prestige and territorial expansion, but as Japan faltered, Bangkok saw the writing on the wall. Thai leaders began secret communications with the Allies, hoping to avoid the fate of a defeated collaborator. In the provinces, this political maneuvering translated into confusion. Some Thai officials clung to authority, insisting that the land would forever remain part of Thailand. Others quietly prepared for withdrawal, sending families back across the border, burning documents and dismantling offices. Soldiers deserted, melting into the countryside or returning home. For the Cambodians, it was a strange and uncertain moment. The occupiers who had ruled their lives so firmly now appeared vulnerable. Markets saw fewer Thai patrols. Schools quietly reintroduced Khmer lessons. Monks spoke more boldly. Yet no one knew what would come next. Would Japan collapse entirely? Would Thailand retreat? Would France return to reclaim its colonies? In this uncertainty, hope was tempered by fear. Too many times had Cambodia been promised freedom, only to see new rulers arrive. The return of France. The answer came with the surrender of Japan in August 1945. The atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the Soviet invasion of Manchuria, and the final collapse of Tokyo's war machine ended the empire that had held Southeast Asia in its grip. Thailand, facing Allied occupation and international condemnation, was forced to relinquish its claims. For Battambang and Siem Reap, this meant a sudden shift of power. Thai officials fled, leaving behind offices, schools, and even soldiers who deserted in panic. French authorities, weakened but determined, moved quickly to reassert control. The tricolor flag once again flew over provincial buildings. To some Cambodians, the return of France was a relief. The humiliation of Thai occupation had ended, and the hated assimilation policies were swept away. Khmer once again echoed openly in schools and markets. Temples could celebrate festivals without fear of reprisal. Families retrieved hidden manuscripts, teaching their children openly what had been whispered in secret. But to others, the French return felt like another betrayal. The end of Thai rule did not mean freedom, it meant the restoration of colonialism. The people who had endured hunger and forced labor under Thai occupation now faced the familiar weight of French taxation, bureaucracy, and exploitation. The war had changed everything, and yet, in Cambodia, it seemed, nothing had changed. Scars of occupation. The scars left by the occupation ran deep. Entire villages had been displaced. Families had lost sons and fathers to forced labor, never to return. Manuscripts and relics had been destroyed or stolen, severing links to Cambodia's cultural heritage. Children who had been forced to learn Thai struggled to reclaim their own language, caught between what they had been taught and what their parents remembered. Psychological scars were just as profound. Fear had become ingrained, a survival mechanism carried in every cautious glance and hushed conversation. Trust was fragile, as collaboration and resistance had divided communities. Some had worked with Thai officials to protect their families, others had resisted quietly, and the tension between them lingered long after the occupiers left. The refugees who had fled across rivers or into forests returned to find homes destroyed, fields overgrown, and temples desecrated. Rebuilding was slow, made harder by famine and disease that lingered in the aftermath of war. The provinces had been used and abandoned, pawns in a game of empires, and it was the Cambodian people who bore the cost, the forgotten victors. In the official records of war, the story of Cambodia's occupation was little more than a footnote. International treaties spoke of borders and governments, of alliances and surrenders. Thailand was compelled to return the territories in 1946. France regained its colony, and Japan's empire vanished. 2 diplomats and generals, the matter was settled. But the true victors were not written in treaties. They were the mothers who whispered Khmer lullabies to children forbidden to speak their language. They were the monks who risked arrest to preserve manuscripts. They were the farmers who buried rice in hidden caches so their families would not starve. They were the refugees who braved rivers and forests in search of survival. Their victories were not celebrated with parades or monuments. They were quiet, fragile, and deeply human, the victory of endurance against erasure. Cambodia's survival was not guaranteed by armies or treaties, but by the resilience of ordinary people who refused to forget who they were. The years of Thai occupation, sanctioned by Japan and ended by defeat, remain a shadowed chapter in Cambodia's history. For Battambang and Siem Reap, it was a time of silence, of whispered prayers, of stolen childhoods, a time when identity itself was an act of rebellion. When the French returned, they found a people who had endured not because of colonial protection, but in spite of foreign rule. The Khmer spirit had survived the erasure of language, the theft of heritage, the brutality of occupation. It had survived in the songs sung at night, in the hidden manuscripts, in the stubborn refusal to forget. History often remembers the victors as those who win battles or dictate treaties. But in Cambodia, the victors of 1941–45 were those who endured quietly, who preserved their culture against overwhelming odds. They were not soldiers or statesmen, but villagers, monks, mothers, and children. The shadows of occupation left scars that would shape Cambodia for generations. Yet within those shadows, the flame of identity endured, small but unextinguished, and that flame, carried through the darkness of foreign domination, would one day burn again, reminding the world that Cambodia's story was not one of conquest, but of survival.